Hi, Heather. How are you?
I'm doing well. I love that blue on you today.
Oh, thank you so much. I love the hair on you today. We're matching.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I thought I'd put on the recording right off the bat because we might get some bloopers here uh,
Yep.
because of quite the weekend that have transpired. So I'm trying to get this thing out the way and get the microphone in the way.
Where did you go?
Oh
Home?
my God. Oh my God. So I just hang on, let me adjust. I
Yep.
can't chew gum and walk at the same time, apparently. And I work with a producer, so he sometimes he'll say, "What did you do?" And he'll try to fix it for me in
Oh,
terms of
that's
all of this. There we
beautiful.
go. I got it out the view. Oh my gosh, Heather. And do you go by Heather or Heather Ann?
Heather Ann. It makes
Heather
me feel more
Ann.
Southern.
Yeah, it's a double name, isn't it? I'm a Caribbean woman, so we go by I go by Anne Marie.
I
In
love your
school,
name.
thank you, they were separating it. And I decided when I became an adult, I wanted to join it together.
Good for
So
you. Good for you. Me
uh,
too.
let me tell you about my odyssey. We'll figure out who's the host and who's the guest in a moment. And I've got to give the show title, and I will do that in due time.
Of
But
course.
what I wanted to say is, I took a trip up to New York. I was raised in Brooklyn, New York, and I traveled there to attend the funeral of my beloved cousin.
Mm.
And, he grew up in our family more like a
Oh,
brother and
beautiful.
sister than cousins. And the bus company that I use shall remain nameless, but you can figure it out because I
Yeah.
never drive in New York. It's too intimidating for me. And that is, they now don't go direct from point A to point B. And so
Mm.
there are multiple stops. And I get off the bus. I've already contacted Uber because I didn't want to wait 30 minutes for an Uber. So I've already called them. And you know what Uber does is they charge you. And so the fee has been paid. I'm waiting for my Uber. My luggage is not on the bus. I
Wow.
no. It's not on the bus. And I'm just Heather Ann.
Now, where do you live right now?
I'm in the state of Maryland. So
Maryland.
I was
Okay. Yeah.
traveling to New York
Yeah.
and my luggage is not on the bus. And there's a moment in time, it's just like, do I stand here and argue with the bus driver or do I turn because the Uber is waiting down there that has already charged me and I'm going like this? Like I literally don't know what to do. And
Of
so
course. And what so did you do?
oh my gosh. Of course, you get the standard connection, the standard answer, contact customer service. Didn't have a phone number. That should have been my first clue. Didn't
Right.
have a phone number, but you go online and pick it up. My luggage is lost. You can't even call the stations. Like I thought about calling the stations
Not
where
anymore.
you can't do that anymore.
Right.
So the situation is I had to fill out an online form. And this is why it's so traumatic. I'm sharing my trauma with you. That's why I
Okay.
say I might be the patient today.
Sure. Yeah.
Heather and like I wear a lot of hats. And so I had a hat that's about as old as my 20 something old son. And all my makeup. So I'm coming to you people without my makeup. I have some lipstick on, but My foundation, my blush, my eyeliner, my mascara. Oh my God, all my makeup, the whole makeup bag is gone. And my hat. And when we go to funerals, we got to wear the good shoes and the good pocketbook. The pocketbook is gone.
So you were stripped of everything.
It was stripped, and I'm just like, on top of being the reason for it wasn't like I went to New York for a joyride. I went to New York
Sure.
for a funeral. So I'm
Right.
like, oh my God. Anyway, listen. This is Anne Marie, host of About This Life. About This Life is about the transformative power of our experiences that take us from one place to the next. It is thought that in sharing our stories and bringing it to the public light, that we might find our own paths to healing. There might be an idea that resonates with you. So my guest today is Heather Ann Ferri, who has humored me with me telling the story. Heather Ann, you describe yourself as a healer, a storyteller. There's so much layered context to you. You've got some tap dancing history in there too. And oh my God, I want to find out about this throat thing. So there's a lot we need to get into, Heather. And hi, how are you?
Oh, this is a blessing today. You know, what you shared when we got on kind of takes me to New York City. So I think I want to start there if you don't mind.
Okay, let's go ahead and start and dig right in. I've got my show notes. And by
Okay.
the way, I usually glam up and put on makeup and stuff, but I'm just like,
I think you look beautiful. And I think there's I don't know, maybe something will come of it as I share some of this because there's some sort of unmasking that's happening, with
yes.
the things that you were that accidentally disappeared or the coincidence of not having certain things when you were traveling to New York City. When I went to New York City, I went with $200, a suitcase, and a dream to never go back to Pittsburgh, to never see my family again because of
Mhm.
all the childhood abuse that I had suffered. And I had no idea that when I moved into this small apartment on 58th Street, that right below it was a jazz club where Jimmy
Ooh.
Slide, the tap master, would perform every month and host an event. And growing up, I wasn't a fan of television because my mom was glued to soap operas. That was her therapy. And she believed the scripts of the soap operas, which scared me because as a child, I'm standing in the kitchen listening to the dialogue and thinking, she knows that that's not real, right? But she
Hmm.
acted and learned from their behavioral patterns of narcissism, psychopath, and how to deal with trauma
Let
inappropriately.
me guess, all my children, General Hospital.
The
What
guiding light.
had
I'm not
you
sure what guiding was light. I'm not sure what,
left? Guiding light. Y'all
and
need
what
a
was,
restless.
yeah. And what was also, scary about that time period, and I've talked to mothers who have come to me with trauma, generational trauma, is that back then in the 80s, it was popular to watch those shows. And a lot of times you turned away your children. That became your sort of idol or your obsession instead of actually knowing your child is walking in the house. You're not talking to them during these hours. And, you kind of go, nowadays, we're becoming much more aware. We're turning off devices. We're saying, oh my gosh, I need to have conversations again. How do we talk? How do we use this thing called a voice? But back then, it was more typical. There were a lot of mothers glued to that TV that I found throughout the years of my trauma practice. So when I went to New York City, I really didn't know how I would succeed in show business. I was just
Hmm.
there to get away from it all. But I remember teaching at Broadway Dance Center, which was a really cool teaching gig. When you were hired to teach at Broadway Dance Center, you made it. You know what I mean? Like you made
Yeah.
it as a teacher. You're qualified now, and I was sort of labeled as, a tap master, tap inventive, stepping outside the box. And I
And
remember
all that
going
jazz.
and all that jazz. And I remember going in with my sugar addiction and my PTSD and my brain damage from childhood abuse and just going in and going in. there's this huge bulletin board and there's lots of different, auditions and where to get your shoes and everything. I mean, just thousands of bulletins on this board. And every time I'd walk past it, I'd see the same flyer. And it was like, to me, I look back now and know that something was nudging me. Was it an angel? Was it an ancestor on the
Mm.
other side? Was it God? Was it Jesus? Whatever you believe in, something was nudging me because every time I kept seeing
Right.
the same flyer. And it was for shiatsu therapy.
Mm.
I grew up blue collar. I grew up in a household where we never heard any of the words I talk about: yoga, meditation, clean water. It was pretty simple, And so for me, shiatsu, I didn't know what that was, but I grabbed a flyer.
Pray
I
tell. Let's go.
I was like, and I went home and I read it. I looked up the gentleman and he had a ballet background. He was retired, so there was a familiarity there. And I remember thinking, I need something for this anger. I got a lot of
Oh,
anger.
okay.
I'm not sure what to do with it. And I
Mm.
grew up in a family system where you don't invest in yourself. Like that was never even, you don't get a massage. You don't, I mean, that's just not in our psyche. That it just
That's
we
selfish.
yeah.
That would be considered a selfish thing to do.
And also the money growing up blue collar, just wasn't a luxury either to have that extra money to do that or to even try to set it aside. I
Mhm.
had all those limitations. So for me, I picked up the phone and made an appointment, which I was scared. And there was a lot of negativity at the time because I grew up with a very negative mother. And I was like I heard the voices like, who do you think you are? You don't have enough money for rent. How are you going to do this for yourself? And I just kept, so I made the appointment, but then 2 days later, I canceled the appointment.
Mhm.
And then a week later, I made the appointment. And I always like to share that with people because,
Mhm.
I'm 53 now, I'm not 26. So it's been a
Right.
journey, and I want people to understand if you're at that place, I've been there. And I remember knocking at the door of my first energy healer. And the great thing about shiatsu is that you get to keep your clothes on, which was important for me because my body had been violated so much from childhood abuse that it allowed me to sort of relax into the process. And as soon as I saw him, I just trusted him. Like there was just so much
Hmm.
light. He was such a beautiful, calm, relaxing soul. I sort of describe him as Mr. Rogers.
Okay.
And I would go every other week for about 4 months. And he would work on energy. I would cry. We didn't talk much, but
Hmm.
then there was that one session. And you always have that one session with your
The
healer,
breakthrough.
the breakthrough. He
Yes.
said, you have this choker on with a sun. He said, why do you wear that? And I was like, superficial, like, oh, I don't know. It's just, I'm a Leo and I love the sun. And then there was silence. And I was like, well, why did you ask me that question? And he was like, I think that's choking your voice.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. And I was like, I walked home that day. So I walked
Hmm.
about 20 streets in New York
Hmm.
City back to
Thinking
Hell's
about that.
Kitchen at the time. I was living in Hell's at that time, Hell's Kitchen. And I was angry. He triggered me. I was angry. I was like, well, what is he talking about? I mean, it's just a necklace. I mean, what can it do? That's not choking me. I don't know what he's talking about. And I looked in the mirror when I got home and I thought, well, you haven't taken it off since you put it on because we are energy and everything we have
Yes.
kind of has a meaning to it. That's why you losing stuff, there is something deeper there you might not know yet, but you will discover that. Is when I took it off because he had been doing energy work, I got dizzy and I started to see the childhood abuse that I had stored
Mm.
away. And that childhood abuse is when I was 8. My mom would come into my bedroom in the mornings when my dad was at work and my brother was at school. And she would begin choking me from behind and screaming horrific things, trying to kill me. And unfortunately, this went on for a period of off and on for a year. And then I had a lot of obviously health issues and brain damage. And so as I took that necklace off, I started to cry and remember, oh, this is the root of your anger. And I
Mm.
decided not to put the necklace back on. But then the next session, because there had been trust built, and trust me, it takes time when you've been such physically violated. I was able to share a little bit, and then Tom was able to start working on my throat. I didn't speak. As you talked about, I mean, I was a tap dancer and
Right.
I got my tap shoes when I was 3 years old, and it was like a language I knew. So I was very gifted with it. It got me a lot of attention. It got me a lot of awards. I was in the newspaper all the time. But, what's kind of sad looking back at that 8 and 9 year old who kind of looked like she had a massive stroke at one
Hmm.
point is I have to ask the questions, where were the doctors? Why did they over medicate me from age 9 to 16? Why didn't they see that something was actually physically wrong? Where was my other relatives? Where was my dad? Why didn't anybody see this pain? There was one point I couldn't move my neck for 2 weeks. And so I always tell people as they're healing any types of traumas or they have a family member that's been violated that we all have denial and we all have different masks
Yes.
and we all have
Mechanisms.
different
Yeah,
we all
about.
have different lenses on that we're dealing with our own stuff. My dad was dealing with his own stuff, couldn't see past to his daughter. My brother was dealing with his own stuff, surviving a household with a rageaholic. And, but for the other adults, they didn't see it too. And that's very common because then I went into a trauma practice, as you know, after I left show business. Um, After 10 years, I had a great career and I was actually becoming really well known in New York City as a yoga Pilates teacher as well
Heather,
and a
and
healer.
before you go on to
Yeah.
the future in terms of your progress, did you find the root of your mom's trauma, like why she was doing that? Are we taking a look at mental illness, or what is the root for her that caused her to act and behave in these ways?
So
Do
I
you
don't
know?
know if I can, fully answer for herself, but having gone through so much healing work on my own,
Hmm.
her dialogue, because we have programs generationally, we have programs from our ancestors. If people
Yes.
believe in past lives, then that's another program in your soul database. My interpretation of my mother is that she had a lot of programming of what I would label as a slave owner archetype.
Unpack that for us. Come on.
But I had a lot of programming as a slave archetype.
Hmm. So, is that a different way of saying people pleasing, or I'm at your service, I'm at your command?
Oh,
Is
my
that a
mom,
different
that's well,
way?
the slave owner archetype is an entitlement. It's a way of demeanor of grandiose, and she bullied everybody in my perspective in the house and in the system because when I came out with the abuse, nobody sided with me. Psychopath and narcissists are very charismatic. They have a hold on people, and sometimes I think people are actually afraid of them, as I was. And so there's a lot of fear for victims to use their voice or come out. But it was this whole I control everything. Um, how I look to the outside world matters more to what's going on in the household.
Yes.
Always belittling, jealous of attention that isn't where she's getting the compliments as the mother, you
Hmm.
know, uh, very, very controlling. So I never grew up with after that moment. I mean, I was basically trying to balance out two unstable parents, very much a lot of trauma, and trying to, I was the adult as far as I'm
Yes.
concerned. In a household of a complete instability. So when I studied it years later, I started to realize my grandmother on her side, we didn't know her mother because she died during childbirth, and we didn't know who the father was. She was raised by
Hmm.
her older sister. she was darker skinned, so I can assume now that Black was in that lineage. Um, but at the same time, I also had kind of studied a lot of slave and slave owner consciousness because of my tap dancing career and how everybody compared me to Black men when I don't look like a Black man.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a compliment because they were all my grandfathers, Gregory Hines, Jimmy Slide, Henry Latang. I write about them in my book. I speak about them often. They were incredible men to me, and I take it as the highest compliment, but it's a unique compliment, right? I'm not in the
Yes, it's a unique compliment. So I'm trying to make the connection in my brain as I'm listening. Yes, you are a storyteller.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yes.
and so I started studying slavery and sort of the conscious programming of that, which I think my father had a lot more of that sort of conscious programming. So I think of them as karmics, the yin and the yang,
Yes.
and sort of that mentality and how do you heal that? But when you think about the slave owner, not all of them, of course, but some of them come from obviously severe abuse,
Hmm.
severe traumas that then they just sell their soul over and over again is my interpretation. They just justify their evilness and their behavior. So
Yes.
um but that's deep. That's ancestral work. That came later in my life. That came when my father passed away in 2022. But it's all linked to tap dancing because, to be given shoes at 3 and to be able to have all that rhythm, um, that's coming from some sort of down bass. Yeah, that's coming from somewhere. And Jimmy Slide and the Masters would talk to me off stage. That's the relationship they were building. That was very shy back then. But
Hmm.
their energy was very much sacred. It was almost like they knew, you can't lie when you're tapping anger and rhythms and a vocabulary. They're like, well, where did you learn this? Or where did you learn to turn? And I didn't know how to answer it. And they were like, God. They answered, God.
Because it's almost as though you were the note, you were the music, you were the art. You weren't doing or performing the art. You yourself was the art. And so you were being used to
Yeah.
channel that particular art form. And the telling of your story, um, how how do you break the generational trauma?
Well, for me personally, it's first of all using my voice
Hmm.
because a lot of the women on both sides of my lineage did not have that option for whatever reason, whether it was slavery, domestic violence, um, just the circumstances of poverty.
Hmm.
And I'm very much aware of that. So as I come out using my voice as authentically as I can, that upgrades my health. That sets them energetically on the other side more free as far as I'm concerned, the generational cursor. But for me also, like, I had to let a lot of people go that I loved because they were
Yeah.
not willing to face their own shadow work and possibly see me in a different lens. It's tough with families because when you grow up, you have a lens and a vocabulary. And because I spent so many years rewiring my brain and healing and releasing and doing the work, I just don't think the same way. I don't act the same way.
Mhm.
And, for me, it's about my healthy relationships now, my building businesses. I didn't grow up in a family where they said women could build businesses, where women
Mhm.
could have their own money.
Entrepreneur, what?
Yeah, yeah, that was not even an option.
Yes.
And so I think that is how that's always been my motivation of healing. Also, my motivation of healing, to be honest with you, is the more that I would heal, the more that I would feel the pain and cry it because it's not fun.
Hmm.
Um, it was about the battle of evil because I didn't want evil to win. I'm light. I'm a good human being, and I don't care what anybody thinks about me or what they say. I'm not
Right.
perfect, but I'm
Right.
good. And I have always done gracefully the good thing, even around dark people like my mom. But I don't tolerate darkness anymore. I call predators out. And if they don't want to own up and pay their debt and do their work, then that's handed over to the universe.
Tell us about getting unstuck there because and we want to clarify dark in this case means in terms of evil forces or shadows of or harm. And
Yes.
a light in terms of goodness, in terms of
Love.
healing, in terms of love, wholeness, and so on and so forth. There's that dichotomy, and it seems to always be a battle. There is um there's a tightrope that you walk because your loved ones, especially your base family, when you can see things and they don't necessarily see life through the same lens. And you mentioned find your voice or speak your voice often. Uh, um, a- and I'll just speak from my own experience. There are times when I've wanted to say things to them, but I did not. Or I said things and I knew that they wouldn't take it from a place of light. They would take it from a place of what is she trying to do? Um, and that is a hard road to toe when you have a certain gifting and you can feel other people's pain, you can have the discernment, and but when you speak, how do you know when to speak? How do you know when to be quiet? How do you know when to let the next light worker
You know,
do their work?
that's beautiful said. I have to say that I haven't spoken too much about my family in
Hmm.
regards to this because they haven't chosen to meet me halfway.
Hmm.
So, years ago, I left the family system for 7 years. And in those 7 years, I had a private trauma practice, which taught me so much about sciences, as well as I was working full time healing myself. Like nobody saw
Hmm.
that work. You know what I mean?
That part. Yeah.
Then I go back into the family system during COVID, which I don't regret because going back into the family system, um, it let me see I could hear now. Like, because I had healed brain damage, like I healed a lot of my brain. I could hear the dialogue never changed. Everybody else, the same dialogue over and over again, you know? And I talk about the television when I go to my parents' house. I said, we have to turn this off when I'm here. They would honor that because I couldn't handle the frequency of the television. I couldn't handle why they
Hmm.
would listen to that all day because it's just programming them. I
Right.
learned to sit in meditation and silence, which is very uncomfortable at first. But as soon as you start to master breath work and meditation work, you're mastering to heal generational traumas. And so as
Absolutely.
yeah, and so as I went in, I had some uncomfortable conversations with my mom, which was interesting. She'd go in and out of states, and then my father got sick, and I write about that in a new book coming up. And that was really important for me to be there for him. I don't regret that, even though it took a lot out of me. It taught me how I don't want my end of my life to end.
Hmm.
It taught me that be invest in people that really invest back on conditional love, not conditioned love. So my mom has conditioned love. So it taught me a lot of things during that time period. And then I left the family system without really saying anything because I didn't have to. I'm not on their radar.
Right.
And that's
Because,
hard for people to understand, but I'm not on their radar. Like they
yeah,
don't.
you're not on the same frequency as they are. Before we get into the healing aspect in terms of what you do and how you help people to heal, I guess my last question about the situation we find ourselves in terms of most people, you mentioned a family system. Is that the same or different than people, for example, who do inner child work? What are the differences or similarities between, oh, I'm going to go back and work on, my youth, my as a young person and how I reacted to things that were done with me versus this family system? Are they similar or are they different?
Well, so one thing that's very different about the work that I do that I was led to do is how do I explain this? Is early on in my trauma career, I was getting stroke clients, I was getting therapists, I was getting doctors. And honestly, I was really humbled by it because at that moment, we're talking 15 years ago, I still had the dialogue that I'm the dumb dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from my family system. I wasn't the academic smart one,
Yes.
right? But the creative arts, what that gave me was the ability to improvise and to create, like, when you're creating stew, you put the
Mm-hmm.
vegetables together. Well, I started to have these sciences, but I was like, that one's not working. So, and when people would fill out their forms, I would see all the sciences they've done, or all the meds, or all the supplements. So I started to sort of take notes and start to see patterns. One of the things that I'm bringing forward right now is these sacred brain protocols. So I didn't sit across from people and talk.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't trust talk therapists for the most part because all my friends that went to them, they didn't seem to change a whole lot. And I want to see results. Like that's always been in my wiring for some reason, like my own, you know, go to New York City on your own, create a world record, I'm the one, I'm going to get out of this,
Make
family.
your own lane.
Yeah, make my own lane. So that's sort of, so the sacred brain protocols were led to me by my father, ironically, because when my father hurt his shoulder in Pittsburgh during construction, his therapist, this is 30 years ago, when yoga was not popular, wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
some Kundalini yoga sets to reverse his diabetes. And he did it privately without telling anybody because my dad was that type of guy. So when I came back to New York to visit him, he introduced me to what I call medical meditations. And the reason I say
Yes.
medical is because they have PubMed research. They're not the type of meditations where you visualize and those are all great, but these actually have
Mm-hmm.
science. And so once I got into the trauma work and people were stroke and they don't know, they don't remember the childhood abuse, right? They don't remember the sexual abuse.
Oh, they blocked it.
They
Yes.
blocked it. I started to find a guy who was in California for the last 50 years in the psychiatry world that had created these sacred brain programs with breath patterns, finger placements, Sanskrit. And he had done all the PubMed, but he hadn't taught anybody how to use them. There
Mm-hmm.
weren't no teacher trainer programs. That wasn't his lane and it never became his lane. But I took those programs and those are the things that I started to see people rewiring their inner child. So there's a childhood abuse brain protocol, which is amazing.
Yes.
So you're not talking your story, you're rewiring it, you're crying it out, you're feeling pain, you're shaking pain out in your body. You may write about your story through that process, but
Mm-hmm.
the English or whatever language you've been brought into is not the first thing we're going to work with, which I kind of
Right.
like because, you know, a lot of my clients would come to me feeling like they've tried the positive affirmations, they've tried all that.
Yes.
And well, if you actually have brain damage, if somebody's hit you, or if you have neurological issues, how do you rewire that so that I love myself can actually be
Mean
registered in the
something.
body? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love the brain programs. There's one for ADHD, there's one for OCD, there's one for PTSD, there's one for childhood trauma. And I did all four of them on myself because I literally had all of those lanes, even though the medical field didn't label me with all of those lanes. They actually benefited me in coming out and healing. So I can tell people today at 50, I'm almost going to be 54 years old. I'm more flexible than I've ever been. And I don't work out like I used to as a dancer. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have pain when I work out. I have more energy, more better sleep. I've anti-aged. And so why wouldn't you want to share that? Like, why wouldn't you want to like, you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely. I need to call you up, Heather Ann, because This
So
lower back
it's
pain, I'm just like, I have some issues that emotional issues that are stuck. At least I'm aware enough that I know I have some things that are stuck. And when we think about chakras,
yes.
that part of the body, and I'm just like, Anne Marie, you got some emotional things. So I want you to imagine
Mm.
someone walks in, they say, Heather Ann, this is what's going on with me. How do you work in terms of helping a client? First, they have to find a healing or have some form of healing, but then they have to take ownership of it because they have to embody it in order to continue to cultivate it within themselves. So, what's the process when a client comes to you? When Anne Marie comes to you?
You're so sweet. So that's a really great question because it changed over the years. As I
Mm-hmm,
became more expertise and advanced, I realized that the 1 hour a week was not going to do it. And because I'm result oriented, it's not that I want somebody to heal fast, but I want them to be able to heal. And what I noticed is once a week or 1 hour a week doesn't really shift too much. And if you're in a negative environment specifically, it's going to be really hard. And so I started to change into like 3 hour sessions on Zoom, which
okay.
Zoom is great because you can record the sessions, you can record the meditations we're doing. And then, so what happened is I required the student to have to do more homework.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to do it. You have to do what I would do naturally. Because as a professional dancer, I trained, you go to the ballet bar every day to learn how to do that right so you don't hurt yourself. So I had the training to, after working 8 hours a day with clients, to do another 6 hours on myself. But most people are not trained that way. So
Yes.
it comes to a point where now I would do a 3 hour preliminary session with somebody where I have their medical information liability form, where I get a
Mm-hmm.
chance to see, okay, I did these meds or I did these therapies, and they're all great. They're all stepping stones, by the way. But it gives me the whole frame of, okay, you're coming into this. And then I introduce them to some things for the 3 hours and see how we work together. Because I'm an energy healer. You're going to get energy healing on the channel. Sometimes when I chant, people have experiences. But then after that, we proceed. Some people, honestly, it's those 3 hours that initiate something that gets them going. For other people, then it's a month of really setting aside some time to work. I've had CEOs fly in for 10 days, working
Mm-hmm.
every day with me. I've had CEOs fly in for 3 days, 8 hours a
Mm-hmm.
day, which is better because it gets you in the game and you have tools. Because I'm going to tell you, I still drink the medical grade water that I promote. I still write in my journal every night. I still do breath work 10 minutes a day. It's my lifestyle. So you're
Right.
building lifestyle skills, they
Right.
don't go away. And so for you and your audience, what I've started to do, because I'm starting to try to build a business team to build systems into to help get
Mm-hmm.
this to more people. But on my YouTube channel, I have 2 free playlists. And I created those playlists because if you're serious about working with me privately, then you'll do those playlists. You'll grab a
Mm-hmm.
notebook and pen. And the reason why, and I saw this in one of your episodes, the reason why you want to write on a
Yes.
piece of paper is because when you type, you're only using about 8 movements.
Mm-hmm.
When you write, you're feeling what you're writing.
And your
So
brain is
you're
working.
it's 10,000 movements. So
Yes.
we need to be writing in cursive, especially when you want to build wealth. Like that's a whole other lane, but you should be writing. And then taking this away from our children is not good. That's why in my book, my first book, Transcending Victim to Goddess, there's these chapters and then there's questions. Get a notebook and write them out. And if you don't know the answers, then do a private session with me where we do childhood brain protocol or we do the PTSD brain protocol.
Mm-hmm.
But for the free playlist on YouTube, it's psychology of breath work. And that's where you want to start, Anna Marie, if you have back pain. You want to start with the breath work, not just doing one nostril breathing, but understanding what you're learning about what your inhale and exhale mean psychologically in the body so that you start to become your own healer. That's how I teach.
Absolutely. And I want to say you're talking to a writer.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
So I teach it for a living. I'm trying to get this book out, which
Oh,
keeps,
beautiful.
oh my goodness, the deadline keeps extending. So
What do you
2026
write
is my
about?
year. Letters and verses. And what I write about the letters speak to that inner child healing we were talking about. I've gone through a time or two with a few healers in terms of
Yeah.
working with them and uncovering some of the things that happen in childhood. And as someone, for example, who coaches students in spoken word, I like to say I
Mm.
produce poet laureates, youth poet
Hmm.
laureates. One of my former student became a youth poet laureate for the district. So I help people find their voice through words, and whether that be spoken as in poetry slams, or whether that be literally writing. And so, writing is a healing modality, definitely. I'm also an arts integration master teacher. So, I bring in dance and music and visual art and all of that as on an educational perspective. One can say that it speaks to creativity, creating something that comes from within and from the God source. But also, I have found through years of doing it that it is actually a healing thing.
Hmm.
Most definitely so. But I kid you not, this backache is a whole different. It's a whole different beast. Um,
There's something that's coming to mind, but I'm going to wait till offline because we may do a second episode on this. But with the theater arts, I think it's brilliant what you're doing with writing. It is so necessary. And through all of this, so I went to show business. I went 18 years in a private trauma practice. Now I'm sort of picking and choosing and building systems, but I wrote songs that I'm going to be producing this year using my voice
yes.
as a singing voice. And that is a way. So I totally understand. And I think you would appreciate the book, Transcending a Victim to God, is because that's part one, because it actually was my father's decision on the other side. I wrote it with him on the other side. And he said, look, I want people to start being able to write their stories out because what I learned
Yes.
in the classroom is everybody was so concerned about their family. What do they think? And what's going on with so and so? They're so concerned about worldly issues, but they don't know anything about themselves. And once you start doing these brain protocols and memories are coming up, I have a really interesting way, as I'm sure you do, of
Hmm.
getting to see sort of the miracle behind the turmoil. The God's bringing you into a different direction if you can see it. And a
Hmm.
lot of times they just need that nudge of, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And then they're inspired and then they start looking at situations and going, oh, I
And
could look
that's
at it
how
this
we
way.
break generational curses, by the way. That's how we break because there's so many of us in terms of it's embedded in our culture to grow up protecting the family name no matter what.
Yes.
That we would do that. And so that is one of the portals for that. I guess in terms of, bringing a conversation towards closure, I think about going back to something you said earlier in terms of compliment you receive in terms of the soul of a Black man. And then when people look at you, they see a white woman, obviously. Look at me, I'm a Black woman. How do we operate on the same frequency? How do we get there? Because I understand what it is you're saying, but how do we help others to understand this really isn't about color? because one of the questions I had in it, for example, when I was reading your bio, long-winded question, I know, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
No, this is beautiful.
Is
Beautiful.
this is this thought, how does someone like a Heather Ann, how can you possibly understand my trauma, as a Black woman? And as we're having this conversation, it becomes, well, you don't even need to understand the nuance of it. You just need an understanding of what it is globally. And then it's up to the individual to do the work. So tell me if I'm on the right course or if I'm on the right
Well,
space or.
it's an interesting thing because I think that so when I first started on the journey in my 20s and I'm in a predominantly Black male dominated field, I mean, I was also working in show business, choreographing and other shows, but that was
Mhm.
the tap dancing field was my soul tribe.
Yes.
You know, Jimmy Slide was a very mystical, magical human being. I kind of foresee him as a prophet. Savion Glover talks about him being sort of as a prophet energy at this point, and I actually consider myself of that
Mhm.
energy as well. Um, it just depends on where somebody's sitting at. If you're watching television all day and being programmed, you're probably not going to relate to the fact that we're soul beings. And
Yes.
our outside appearance is just an outside shell. It's not actually the soul database. So
Hmm.
say I don't understand something, being choked from 8 to 9 years old and not being able to talk in a household, that's a pretty hardcore abuse, first of all. But the fact that I took down some of the pictures, but I've had rashes and swelling all over my body. I'm saying I was a slave in a past life. I don't
Hmm.
care if you or somebody else doesn't believe me because you see a white color, but that may hinder you because there are Black people that were slave owners. So
Hmm.
it's very important to own your soul database and ancestral lineage. My parents are very interesting archetypes because I could have blamed both of them for making me the scapegoat. But what
Right.
they mastered me at is one was a slave archetype, one was a slave owner archetype. That's not a coincidence in my work and helping people unravel. So when I'm in the classroom, I started to learn that color was not what we're looking at here. We're looking
Hmm.
at what the body tells you. Because let me tell you, the body doesn't lie. When it starts shaking out trauma and you have swelling and rashes and all this, I had
Yes.
rashes of the mask that Black women had to wear, I can't make that up. I have pictures of that, you know?
Right. And
So that,
hives and all those things.
yeah, that
Yes.
so I think when it comes to generational healing, we have to be responsible for ourselves as far as understanding in general what women are going through right now in America or in the world. I think, one of the things that I'm really proud of is a lot of the generational healing and a lot of the different lanes I'm in. It's the mothers and grandmothers that are doing more of the work right
Yes.
now. And it
Typically
doesn't
is.
matter what race, color, culture, they are all stepping into this. And I admire them for that. I've
Hmm.
had women who were abusers too, by the way, step into this work and own it. Not so
Hmm.
much men. And I'm not saying, but I hope to see more men doing generational trauma work. But I've just seen in my so far path, and maybe it's just because that's what I was supposed to see, because I'm healing
Yes.
the woman, I'm healing the divine feminine. We're helping women come into their divine feminine. And, the last part of my showbiz career that I'm very proud of, and I didn't make a lot of money. It wasn't about money. I got women together, and a lot of them were on Broadway. They worked for free for me. And we wrote shows in the East Village about women's issues.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we highlighted because everybody was tired of the commercial voice on Broadway. No offense. I mean, it could be fun, but it doesn't always represent what we as women, that's what I
Hmm.
think as we come together, as you and an artist spoken word, we need to come together more and work together more.
Yes. Connection, community,
Yes.
and talk about the real things, because who tells your story is really important and is
Yeah.
really significant. Who gets to tell your story? And the interesting thing is you might not even know your own story. That's
Well, that's it. And also,
that's
you
it.
know, I didn't know 30 years later, after being in many different tribes where the leaders were psychopaths or narcissists, that I would be talking about those men, those Black men.
Hmm.
What a
Hmm.
better way for me to contribute to that culture in this shame and this sort of shape and form by saying these were the only men that didn't hit on me. These were the only men that
Right.
respected me because they saw me as a soul. These were the only men that guided me and I felt safe around. I
Hmm.
wish we had more of these men in our society right now who have platforms and aren't abusing them.
Hmm. I wish we did too. So I would love to thank you for this very rich conversation, thought provoking. Um, Hopefully, our audience will find a path in terms of like asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said earlier, giving the nudge to go ahead and explore. Um, I want the audience to take what resonates with you. Hold it up to a light of your own faith and your own knowing, and be willing to explore a path that maybe you didn't think was possible or contrary to everything that you've always known about yourself. And that's going to take some courage. That's going to take some courage to step. So, healing is your birthright. Go explore it, journal it, pray over it, talk to someone you trust, ask the questions, and sometimes we have to let go stereotypes. And as Heather Ann has taught me a new word today, the soul database. I love that one. We need to go to the soul and find out what our soul is telling us as well as what our body is telling us. So Heather Ann, just in closing, you want to tell us, share with our audience, how do people get in touch? How do people get in touch with you?
That was just so rich and beautiful. It's just been an honor to be on this show. And the best way is through email.
Mhm.
youmatter108 at gmail.com. You can learn about me on my YouTube channel, Heather Ann Ferri, with those two free playlists. One is Breathwork for Leaders, one is Breathwork for Stress, Trauma, and Emotional Pain. Hey, go into some of those, learn my teaching style, learn about me, and that might intrigue you to, ask questions. That's the key. That is the key. Don't jump to assumptions, just ask questions. But yeah, email or a YouTube channel is the best way to sort of start to introduce yourself to me. And I thank you so much for allowing me to use my voice today and have this sort of unique
Yes.
conversation. Definitely unique. And
Yes.
I feel honored and blessed. And for those who are listening, just thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was a joy to have you on. This is Anne Marie, host of About This Life, where we are adding life to our years, changing our lives one day at a time. If any of this resonates with you, please like, share, subscribe, all of the things. Follow me at About This Life. Take care, everybody.